Hey y'all, my name is Travis, and today I'm going to walk through how you can update the existing items in your cost catalog. It's actually pretty simple. In your budget, of course, you have those mass actions. You kind of just click on the things you want to change. If you want to update the margin, for example, it's a pretty simple process. In the catalog, though, there are so many items. There's potentially up to, let's say, 50,000 cost items. Hopefully that's not the case for you, but it could be robust, right? And so that functionality in the budget isn't here in the catalog too, but fortunately there's a relatively easy process to run those updates. To do it, you would go to your catalog, and in the top right of the screen, you see this export button. This will bring our catalog into a spreadsheet. So we'll open up that file. And the gist of this is, let's make the changes on our file, and then we can import them back into the system. What you want to change, of course, is going to impact where we go from here. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. And so you don't need to include all of this data when you're re-importing back into the system. I think from a cleanliness perspective, I like to clean this up. Really important part of this, though, is this first column, which is the cost item ID. Anytime you export from JobTread, it's going to provide this ID. So when we supply this on the import, it's knowing that we're not trying to create new items, we're trying to run an update. So if I wanted to change anything like the cost type, for example, you could do that just by updating here in the spreadsheet, and then you run an import. But for the sake of the example here, let's just go through and update the margin. Let's just take the first item on the list, actually. So I'm going to remove everything else from the file. I'm only going to be left with that single row, which is this screw. I believe it's a screwdriver in this case, and maybe the cost of this went up. I don't really need to leave all of this information here because we only need to include what we're actually updating. So for me, maybe it's just the unit cost and the unit price. So I'm going to remove all this other stuff just to create cleanliness. So I'm left with 4 data points here. I have the cost item ID, I have the cost item name, which technically isn't even required, but I like to include it just so when I'm looking at the file, I know what I'm updating. And then you have the cost and price in this example. Maybe I want to update my cost to be $8, but then maybe I wanted to apply a 40% profit margin on top. Instead of putting the unit price, replace that column with margin, and then just put in 40%. JobTread has logic built in to where if you run an import like this, it will do the math on the fly and calculate that 40% margin as you run the import. The alternative route here is to set it to unit price as the column header, and then just put in the specific dollar amount. If you're talking in terms of markup, the way you could go here is you could just reference this cell and multiply it by, let's say, 1.5 if you're trying to hit a 50% markup. But for the sake of the example, I'll just keep it at 40% here so you can see how that's going to auto-calculate for us. But when you're ready to go, you can just save the file. And back in JobTread, you'll go to the catalog, you'll go to the import button, and of course, click and drag that file across or click the upload button. And that is going to give us the 4 columns on our spreadsheet and the 4 data points that I'm importing into. Just give it a once over, make sure it looks good. Again, because we exported from JobTread, we know the headers are going to be the same, so it should be right. But now I see everything looks right, so we'll click import. And let's just check that first item. So now that first item is an $8 cost. Price is $13.33, and that's a 40% profit margin. So it did work as we were expecting. So just the one gotcha there is that when you are importing dollars, make sure always to include a cost and a price. And if you don't have that price, just put in the profit margin, and that will do it for you on the fly. One last thing I wanted to mention that's a really helpful tool. If you have some cleanup to do, if you want to get rid of some things, you can also mass delete through the import process. So the way you would do this, let's say you have your large file with everything on it, you would add a column called delete, and the value would be true for all of the items that you want to get rid of. So if you had hundreds of items in this file, just know it would only delete the items that you put the value of true in that row. And when you run the import, again, it's going to recognize that delete column as something you're using to remove the items, but the import process looks the exact same. The only caveat and gotcha you might run into with this, if you try to delete an item that is a part of a cost group, it's going to throw an error. It's going to say, hey, you can't remove this item because it's currently being used. That's just a protection that we put in place because you might have a team of 20 estimators. If one person deletes the item, it could be deleting it in all of the templates where that item is being used. So it's just a protection. So if you do run into that error, you can go to the item, you can see the cost groups that it's a part of, click into it, it'll take you to that group. remove the item, and then you'll be able to delete it from the system. So that's it. If you have any questions at all, our support team is available for all the help that you need. Our email is going to be support@jobtread.com. Thanks so much.